Now, Mozambique authorities say the death toll from Cyclone Chido has risen to 45. The National Disaster Risk Management Institute said the storm has also left 500 people injured and destroyed around 35,000 homes in the northern provinces of Niassa, Nampula, as well as Cabo Delgado, which have suffered massive destruction. Joined now by Guy Taylor, who is the Chief of Advocacy, Communications and Partnerships at Unicef Mozambique. Guy, thank you so much again for the time. We spoke very recently, and while the weather conditions at the time had perhaps eased up, of course, the rescue operation in itself and all the situation there was still a very difficult one. Won't you just give us the latest?
Yeah, well, I came back to Maputo from Pemba yesterday, and driving through some of the countryside around Pemba, what I saw there was really devastation. You talked just now about 35,000 homes having been lost, and that tallies with what I saw, certainly. Many people left completely without anything, homes just completely smashed to the ground. People obviously already very vulnerable in many of these areas in northern Mozambique, or in Mozambique we have about 3.4 million children who are already in need of humanitarian assistance even before this cyclone, and this really is just pushing them into even ever tougher circumstances. So UNICEF is already working hard to distribute supplies to the people hit hardest. We've been doing that for several days now since immediately after the cyclone made impact. We're shipping up new supplies to replenish our warehouses in Pemba, which had been stocked full of essential items ahead of the cyclone. But we're really quite concerned. The scale of the disaster here is beyond, I think, the capacity of the humanitarian system to respond to. And additional support, additional resources are really quite urgently needed here in Mozambique.
Yeah, with regards to getting some of those resources as well, and people that certainly need all this help, how are we doing with regards to that? Is aid actually on its way?
Yeah, well, as I said, UNICEF and our partners and the government obviously saw this storm coming, and we were able to put in place large stockpiles of essential items, things like tablets to purify water, which can prevent people from getting waterborne diseases, things like cholera, malaria, diarrhea, which are some of really the biggest killers of children, and in this kind of situation can kill children very, very quickly. We've put in place medications. Our partners are preparing things like food, shelter materials. So really, a lot of supplies were already there, ready to go. And immediately after the cyclone passed, we started, based on our assessment of the situation, to distribute those, and many of those supplies are going out, and as I said, we're replenishing. But it's a difficult situation. As I said, the scale of the impact is very large, and I think only really becoming clear now. You mentioned the official death toll figure, and that has gone up pretty much every day so far. And then there's also, of course, the longer term impact, the children being cut off from health services, children who may be suffering from severe acute malnutrition, who aren't able to get treatment. When children are supposed to go back to school in the new year, schools perhaps still not being open. So we're working closely with our partners and with government to try to get those services back on stream, to make sure that people are getting the services they need. But again, a very, very challenging situation in northern Mozambique at the moment.
Yeah, certainly feels that way. And one wonders, I mean, you've seen perhaps situations like this, I'm not sure, Guy, but how long does it take to usually get back to some sort of normality following something like this?
Well, yeah, I mean, I have seen similar situations. I was also in Kalimani when Cyclone Freddy hit, and to be honest, it feels a little bit like deja vu here in Mozambique. We're getting hammered by cyclones year after year. We had Idai, Kenneth, Anna, Gombe, Freddy, now Chido. I mean, people try to put their lives back together with whatever they have. As I said, these people are already often living in extremely precarious circumstances. Maybe they don't have access to clean water, they don't have access to health services, they don't have access to quality education. So really, when these cyclones just keep repeatedly hitting a country like Mozambique, I think they wear down its ability to withstand them each and every time, and it gets tougher for people. We're working to invest in resilient infrastructure. UNICEF's supported the building of over 1,000 climate-resilient classrooms since Cyclone Idai in 2019. Those stand up when these cyclones hit. But, much of the infrastructure here is not resilient. And so, we think that We need to invest more in that and prioritize that, because it really does pay off in the long run. But it's a big effort, it's a big project to strengthen the resilience to be able to stand up to disasters of this scale.
Yeah. Guy, I mean, the government itself has also been going through its own situations when it comes to the election, for example, as well. Has there been any communication from the government, further assistance, if possible, as well? Any calls to other countries for the kind of help that is needed here?
Yeah, I think the government has been highlighting the scale of the need, the scale of the impact. Certainly, they've been putting out regular updates around the impact of the cyclone, and we've been working again closely with government, and we were working closely with them before the cyclone hit on preparedness, and they're now leading the response. So it's a joint effort, and we have been able to mobilize already some funding to help us scale up the response, but I think really more is urgently needed if we're going to be able to meet the needs of people who are in extremely tough circumstances at the moment.
It may not necessarily be the best time to be talking about this, but I just wanted to also talk about, cyclone preparedness. How do we actually get that right from this point of view? Of course, Mozambique being a key area in which these sort of cyclones do hit, whether it be heavy rains, etc. This has happened for many years. One recalls back in 1998 when a similar situation happened as well. So how does a country like Mozambique prepare for another situation beyond this?
Yeah, well, I think there's what I would call a hardware component and a software component, right? So as I was mentioning just now, investing in climate resilient infrastructure, so schools that are built in a certain way according to high design standards and using tough materials. They don't necessarily have to be extremely expensive, but they're just built in a way which will stand up and has stood up to this kind of cyclone. Water distribution systems, again, that can stand up to this, and also perhaps that are run on, for example, solar power, so that they can continue to function even when electricity is cut off, as often happens in this kind of situation. So, really investing in that kind of infrastructure and recognizing that we're in the new normal of climate change and climate shocks like this, and we need to, if we're going to build this stuff, then it needs to be resilient. Then the software component, I think there's a lot of work around early warning systems. And Mozambique has actually prioritized that quite a lot. And I think during Cyclone Freddy and during this cyclone, we saw that in action, people receiving messages via text message and other channels. Unicef also has what we call the flood tutor. It's an SMS-based system where we sent messages out to around 150,000 people before the cyclone, telling them how to prepare for cyclone with advice on what to do if your house is flooded, how to stay safe before, during, and after a cyclone. And I think that kind of software component is also very important in helping people to understand how to withstand these shocks and what they can do to minimize the impact on themselves and their families.
Guy, really appreciate your efforts to communicate to us exactly the situation on the ground. I really wish you well as well with your efforts and your work on the ground too there. That, of course, being Guy Taylor there from Unicef Mozambique. Thank you so much for your time.